Nuestro siguiente conferencista es el señor Carlos Velez, quien es director regional para América Latina de APL. Carlos Velez se unió a APL en 1987 en Atlanta como gerente de mantenimiento de equipos. En 2006 fue nombrado vicepresidente y director general de APL de América Latina, cargo que ocupa actualmente. Fue director de la red logística Conectividad de Pozo a Tierra para APL entre 2005 y 2006, básicamente en Oakland, California. En su rol como director general de APL Liner y APL Logistics en México entre 1994 y 2005, el señor Carlos Velez también logró el desarrollo de un transporte multimodal transpacífico de seguridad del sistema patrocinado por el Gobierno de México, AMANAC. Fundó la Asociación México Intermodal, AMTI, y fue elegido como su primer presidente desde 1999 hasta 2003. Fue director de operaciones en México. Además, dirigió la puesta en marcha de operaciones de los buques de APL a través de los puertos de Manzanillo y Lázaro Cárdenas en México, sin dejar de controlar la rápida expansión del tráfico fronterizo intermodal entre México y los Estados Unidos a través de trenes de doble estiba. Con ustedes, el amigo Carlos Velez.
Muchas gracias, buenos días. Yo voy a hacer mi presentación en inglés. Ya entregué una copia a las personas que van a traducir del inglés al español, entonces voy a cambiar, no los quiero confundir, hablando un poco de español y un poco de inglés. So I'll go ahead and change to English. Today, of course, an important day for us. As a shipping company, we have decided that we must grow in order to keep up with the large companies. We're not as large as MSC. Excellent presentation, Gonzalo, very, very well put together. Congratulations, and you can really see the size of MSC versus the rest of the carriers. So when you have AP Motor with Maersk, MSC, then a few others, and APL finds itself in about 6th or 7th position in the world. So today, I decided to break down the presentation a little bit different so that I can address what the shipping lines look for when we are trying to contract for services at port terminals. I'm going to give you a very brief position of APL in Latin America. We're not very large, but we have sufficient coverage throughout Latin America to have enough experience in terminal negotiations and to be able to address with you, whom I expect to be many of the port operators of the Latin America region, as well as possibly Gulf and southern states in the United States. I'm also going to talk a little bit about our footprint in terminals. I'm going to talk about the container trade, the world containerized trade, talk about the world economy and how Latin America fares against the world economy in terms of GDP growth. And I'll talk about contracting for services, how we measure the services. These are only examples of what it is that we do. Then I'll give you just one brief page of my opinion, and I think at the end I'll probably spend about 15 minutes, probably no more than that, and then I'll be available for questions. Before that, let me see, I wanted to provide a thank you, and I think the slide came in a different order, but I wanted to thank Mario Arbolu as well for being the chairman of the organizing committee. Kurt Nagel, also the president for the Latin America Association of Latin American Ports, of American Port Authorities. Jorge Otaran, Kurt Nagel, president of APA, Jorge Otaran, president of the Latin America Ports, and of course, everyone who has worked so hard to put this event together. I'm glad to have been invited. Thank you. I'm honored to stand here in front of you. First, I'd like to show you where APL is present in Latin America. We have a coverage of 22 ports, where we are primarily present on the west coast of Mexico, Central America, Caribbean, and the west coast of South America. I'm not sure why this is not showing in the order that, oh, here we go. The important piece about this slide, and again, I just want to be very brief about APL, but this slide shows how much we depend on the guaranteed berth windows. Gonzalo was making mention as to how important it is, particularly with slow steaming. We come in from Asia, and we come this way, and we come in from Asia this way, crossing the Suez, coming into Savannah, and at the end, all of our services join in Panama, on both coasts of Panama. So from there, we service Central America, Mexico, we service the west coast of South America, and we service Manaus. All of these services are fixed day of the week, fixed day of arrival, fixed day of departure, which is what I believe any of you who might be customers really appreciate. Again, the terminal footprint, we are at 22 ports throughout Latin America. And then I won't bother you with any more of APL stuff, as I'm here to talk a little bit about what it is that we do to contract services with terminal operators. When we take a look at the world container growth and how Latin America fares, Latin America is about 13% of the world containerized trade. What's important to note is that Latin America is growing at a very fast pace, while transatlantic is growing between 1% and 7%, depending on whom you believe and which economists put the numbers together. Everyone has a different number, so I put a range in there from 1% to 7%. Asia, Europe, growing between 5% and 9%. And we have, of course, the largest trade of all, which is the intra-Asia trade, with 40 million TEUs for that trade, growing at a very fast pace, hard to keep up, 10 to 13%. And so between Asia, intra-Asia and Asia-Europe, there's a requirement for larger and larger vessels. And that's why Maersk ordered 10, 18,000 TEU vessels recently. It is believed that those vessels are really not 18,000, that those vessels will have the capacity of about 21,500 TEUs. So you can imagine that. That's just unimaginable at this point in time. Obviously, we will not see those vessels here. They're made for the Malacca Strait to go in intra-Asia trade as well as Asia to Europe. But what does that do? It creates a cascading effect. As Gonzalo was saying, they're already operating 8,500 TEUs. And by the way, APL just last week on the 15th of June put an order for 12 14,000 TEU vessels in Korea, in South Korea. So we're doing our best to try to lower the cost per unit as well so that we can stay competitive. But what it does is that it does bring a cascading effect, which is important for Latin America. Our estimation is that this year the growth is going to be between 4% and 8% for Latin America, and we stand at about 13.2 million TEUs for all of Latin America, or 13%. That requires, of course, better infrastructure, and what it does in the meantime, by cascading, it also creates a downward spiral in the freight rates, particularly from Asia into the Latin American countries because of the added capacity. This is all a question of cost-benefit for the shipping lines, and it's a matter of utilization. So if the trade ends up being at 80 or 85% utilization on average, the rates are going to stay low. If the trade goes into the high 80s, low 90s or above, then the rates will recover. But the rates are depressed right now, and obviously as an industry we need those rates to come up. They don't all have to come from the terminal operators. We all have to chip in. But at the end of the day, the growth of the region requires the services, and for the services to be viable, the rates have to be compensatory. I wanted to show you this graph, which I liked in a presentation that we put together in December for our company. and I wanted to share it with you. This comes from the intelligence unit, from the Economist Intelligence Unit. From November, we put the graph together based on their numbers. But what's important to note is that Latin America has had a 9% compounded annual growth rate between 2003 and 2007, about a 9% growth in here in terms of containerized trade. Then, of course, we dipped a little bit, more than a little bit, in 2009. And then our expectation is that we will continue to grow from here on out at 8 or 9%. In some of the countries that we operate, we have seen the growth in containerized trade to be 3 times the GDP. So there's a 3 times multiple in containerized growth. And part of it is the conversion from bulk to containerized that Gonzalo was talking about. Here, I'd like to compare how Latin America is doing against the U.S. GDP. So we have, of course, Latin America is part of the world GDP, but we're still doing much better than the world average. We do much better than the U.S. Of course, a much smaller economy, but when you put all of Latin America together, you've got $5 trillion. That's quite a lot. It's half of the U.S. economy, so it's not a small pennies. And then against the world GDP, against the U.S. GDP, and against the European Union GDP. So Latin America has done very well. It's expected that it will continue to do very well. Let's take advantage of this forecast so that we can continue to prepare our port infrastructure. So on that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what it is that we do when we go out and contract for services. First, I think we have to provide you as a terminal operator with very clear parameters so that you can come back to us with an accurate bid. We don't want to take too long. We don't want to be playing one against the other to get the best bid. We want to take a look at many parameters. We have to tell you about our business. Today is not simply going out and contract what is my rate to lift off and lift on and go into the gate. We have to explain to you, and we have to become partners in this business. We must give you accurate information about our vessel particulars, what it is that we expect, that we're going to flood you with containers and block you from continuing